Nightworkers. I'm OldDadGuy. I tell scary stories so you can question every sound in your house at 2 a.m. You're welcome. No turning back now. Deep in the Laurel. It started as a simple trip. Two old friends, a map they wouldn't need, and a promise of no cell service. That's what Ben Harper liked most about camping deep in the Appalachian woods. The quiet. The real quiet. The kind that made your ears ring until the forest remembered how to breathe again. Eli Turner wasn't so sure. I'm just saying, he grunted as he hoisted his pack higher. I like trees. I don't like when they close in like they're plotting something. Ben laughed. It's called Laurel Hell, not Laurel Heaven. You wanted authenticity. They were a half a day's hike off trail in a little known part of the Monongahela National Forest, near a town with a population you could count on one hand. At the edge of the trailhead, they'd met an old man whittling by a rusted old truck. He told them to steer clear of the southern gorge. It's too thick down that way, he said, and the laurel don't just catch your clothes, it catches sound, catches your sense of time. Eli, true to form, made a sarcastic comment under his breath, but Ben noticed the man's hands had trembled slightly, not from age, but from something else. They made camp near a creek that first night. Firelight flickering off the knotty curves of mountain laurel that wrapped the hills like tangled veins. After a few beers and a half-burnt bratwurst, Ben brought it up. What do you think he meant about the laurel catching sound? Eli shrugged. Old-timer trying to scare tourists. It's tradition, right? But that night, just past 3, Ben woke to the distinct sound of crunching twigs. Heavy. Deliberate. He sat up in his bag, heart pounding. The cold breath of the forest creeped down his neck. He listened. Then he heard it. His own voice. Soft. Garbled. Ben? It came from beyond the tent, deep in the brush. A whisper that sounded like someone trying to remember how to be him. He didn't move, didn't even breathe. The voice came again. Closer. Ben, I found something. It was Eli's voice now. Only Eli was asleep beside him, snoring lightly. Ben lay back down and shut his eyes tight, heart hammering against his ribs. When the morning came, he didn't tell Eli. Not yet. Because deep down, something about the forest felt wrong. And whatever was out there in the laurel, it knew their names. The next day, they hiked further south, ignoring the old man's warning. Ben led the way, cutting through thick clusters of rhododendron and laurel, their branches scraping like skeletal fingers against their jackets. You sure this is still the right way? Eli asked around noon, pausing to sip from his canteen. Ben glanced at the map. We're off the route, yeah, but the topography should lead us down to a basin where we can set up. Eli frowned. You mean the place the whittling prophet told us not to go? Ben smirked, but didn't answer. By late afternoon, they reached the basin, a quiet hollow where the trees bent in unnatural ways, and the light seemed to fade too early. They found the remains of an old fire ring and a few rusted cans. Someone had camped here a long time ago. That night, the wind didn't move. The air hung thick, and the silence pressed in so hard it buzzed. Ben couldn't sleep. Neither could Eli. Around 1 a.m., they sat outside the tent, staring into the dying fire when it happened. A flute-like sound drifted in from the ridge above. Haunting. Melodic. Inhuman. Eli stood slowly, You hear that? Ben nodded. Then from the darkness, a crack. A branch snapped, not 20 feet away. They froze. A figure stepped into the firelight. But it wasn't right. It was too tall. Its face was all shadow except for the glint of wet black eyes. It moved like it was remembering how to walk. Its joints bent wrong. It opened its mouth, and Eli's voice came out. Ben, help me. Eli grabbed Ben's shoulders. What the hell is that? They backed toward the tent, but the thing didn't follow. It just stood there, twitching like a puppet half hung on its strings. And then it vanished. The laurel thicket shivered, even though there was no wind. The rest of the night passed in silence. At dawn, Eli insisted they leave, but the map no longer made sense. Trails didn't match the terrain. The compass spun uselessly. The forest had changed. It wasn't just a place anymore. It was watching them. They hiked north, or at least they thought they were hiking north. Every direction looked the same. Walls of dense green laurel and ancient oaks dripping with moss. The sun barely reached them. By midday, they stumbled upon something unexpected. A stone marker with strange carvings, twisted shapes, and looping symbols that seemed to flicker in their vision. Old grave marker? Eli guessed. Ben shook his head. This isn't English, or anything I've seen. They pressed on, unnerved, until they came to what looked like an abandoned campsite. 3 tents, shredded. Gear scattered, a campfire that had long gone out. But what made them stop was what lay on one of the tarps. A journal, half scorched and water damaged. Ben flipped through it. The last entry read, "It knows our names now. Don't listen when it speaks. Don't follow the flute. And whatever you do, don't let it take your shape." They left the camp in a hurry, no longer speaking much. The journal's final pages felt too familiar. That night, they didn't make a fire. They sat back to back, knives gripped tightly in their hands, listening. Sometime after midnight, Ben heard his mother's voice calling from the dark. "Benny, I'm lost." He nearly answered. Then he remembered his mother had died 7 years ago. Across from him, Eli trembled. "It's using them. It's digging through us." Ben didn't reply, because he saw something moving just beyond Eli. A shape with Eli's outline, copying the way he sat, the tilt of his head. Except its mouth was too wide, and it was smiling. When he looked back, the real Eli was gone. Ben was alone. But the thing pretending to be his friend sat across from him, grinning with teeth it hadn't earned. It spoke in Ben's voice. "Almost out now." Ben ran. He didn't know where, only away from the thing in Eli's skin. The laurel clawed at his arms, ripping his clothes, but he didn't stop. The thickets opened in impossible ways, paths shifting like the forest was alive and guiding him somewhere. He broke into a clearing just as dusk fell. In the center stood a cabin made of rotting wood, half swallowed by vines. An old ranger station, long forgotten. Inside, dust and mildew thickened the air. A rotted desk, a smashed radio, and carvings, symbols like those on the stone marker, covered every wall. In the corner, a shape stirred. It was Eli. The real Eli. Eyes bloodshot, lips cracking, trembling. It kept showing me things, making me see you, hear you. I stopped answering. I think that's why I'm still me. Ben hauled him up. "We're getting out, together." But as they stepped out of the cabin, the forest moved. Shapes filled the trees, dozens of them, all wrong, all twitching, all smiling with borrowed faces. Some looked like Ben, some like Eli. Some were faces of people they didn't know, faces from old photos, maybe even memories, not their own. And all around them, the flute began again, closer this time, everywhere at once. Ben grabbed Eli's hand. Don't listen, don't speak. They walked. Hours passed. Then the trees thinned. The wind returned. Real wind. A raven called above. A highway glimmered in the distance. They had made it. Maybe. They didn't speak on the drive home. They didn't tell anyone. A month passed. Then two. One night, Ben stood in his kitchen pouring coffee when he heard a knock at the door. 3 knocks. Slow. Measured. He opened it. Eli stood there, smiling. Only Ben had spoken to Eli just hours earlier, on the phone. Eli had been in another state. The thing on the porch tilted its head and said, "You left something behind in the laurel," and smiled with too many teeth. Some say the laurel thickets in the Appalachian woods are thick for a reason. They aren't meant to be walked through. They're meant to keep something in. Camp Hollow's last hike. There's a rule most counselors at Camp Hollow learn fast. Never take the ridge trail after sunset. It's not on any map. The trailhead is hidden behind a collapsed fence at the edge of the old nature trail, the part that got shut down after the first bad flood back in the 90s. No signs, no markers, just a worn dirt path leading up into the hills and looping deep into the woods. I only found out about it because I broke the rules. It was my first year at Camp Hollow, a crumbling old summer camp in rural West Virginia. The kind of place with no cell service, creaky cabins, and legends passed down like mosquito bites. On my second day, I overheard the senior counselors whispering about the hike and how it was off limits, how a group of kids went missing there years ago. But of course, none of that was in the welcome packet. The kids brought it up during the campfire stories. They called it the Vanishing Trail. One boy claimed his older brother hiked it 10 years ago and never came back. Another swore he saw glowing eyes up there once. Not animal eyes, but something bigger, rounder. Watching. Waiting. I laughed it off, but part of me was hooked. A week into the season, after lights out, a kid named Trevor slipped away from Cabin Foxglove. He left a note scrawled in glitter pen. Going to the ridge. Gonna see if the stories are true. That night, a storm rolled in. We searched the main trails and shoreline with flashlights and whistles. No sign of him. The staff called the ranger station. By morning, the storm had washed out half the camp's paths. Search parties came up empty. The strange part, his bunkmate swore Trevor never left alone. He said someone was talking to him, the kid mumbled. He said a girl was waiting for him at the tree with a face. I didn't know what that meant, yet. A few days later, I went up the ridge trail myself. Stupid, I know, but something about it, the way Trevor vanished, the stories, the whispers, it pulled at me like gravity. I left early, just before sunrise. Just a backpack, boots, and a compass. I didn't tell anyone. At first, it was just trail, dirt, roots, pines that stretched like cathedral columns. But the further I hiked, the quieter it got. No birds, no wind, just the sound of my breath and crunching leaves. And then I found it, the tree with a face. A massive sycamore, half dead, with bark warped and twisted into something grotesque. Two knotholes for eyes, a black hollow in the center that looked far too much like a mouth. Below it, the trail split in three directions, but none of the paths were marked. That's when I heard it. A soft giggle, high, girlish, and far too close. "Trevor?" I called out. Nothing, just silence. I turned to leave, and the trail was gone. No footprints, no markers, just woods, everywhere. It was like the forest had shifted behind me. I tried to retrace my steps, but the trees didn't match. Every direction looked the same. Time blurred. My compass spun wildly, and the deeper I walked, the darker it got, even though it was barely just past noon. That's when I started hearing them. Whispers. Dozens of them. Breathy voices slipping through the branches like children playing hide and seek. One voice rose above the rest. Calm, gentle, and wrong. "You came for him. Good. He's waiting." I ran. Branches tore at my clothes. Roots grabbed my ankles. I don't know how long I ran, but eventually I tripped and fell. Hard. When I opened my eyes, I was back at the sycamore. But I wasn't alone. Trevor stood beneath the tree, pale, blank-eyed. His mouth hung open like he was mid-sentence, but no sound came out. Behind him was a girl, maybe 10 years old. Long hair, white dress, feet not touching the ground. Her eyes were black. Not dark, black. Like holes had been carved out of her face. She pointed at me. "You're not supposed to be here," she said. The forest groaned around us. The air turned heavy, pressing in like a vice. I felt my legs move before I thought, sprinting back the way I came. And this time, the trail was there. I made it back to camp just before dusk, muddy, bleeding, rattled. I told the director everything. He looked tired. Not surprised, just tired. "You saw her," he said. "The hollow girl." He explained in hushed tones that decades ago, a little girl had gone missing on that very trail. She was never found. No search parties, no dogs, no signs. Some say she got lost. Others say the forest took her, made her part of it. Every year since, a kid goes missing. Always on a cloudy day, always near the woods. Trevor was never found. They told the parents he ran off. But I know better. He didn't run. He was called. Camp Hollow closed the next summer. Nature reclaimed the paths. The ridge trail is still there, buried beneath thorns and dead leaves. But if you're ever hiking out that way and you hear a giggle, turn around. And if you see a girl by the tree with a face, don't answer her. Because once you speak your name, the forest keeps it, and you'll never leave Hollow Ridge again. The Counselor Who Stayed Late. Most camp legends fade with time. Stories get diluted, kids forget, and the forest swallows the past like it never happened. But not this one, because I was there the night Matthew Heller disappeared. And I was the one who found what he left behind. It happened the last week of summer, during Camp Teardown. Camp Black Hollow had already emptied out. The buses were gone. The cabins were stripped bare. Just a skeleton crew of counselors stayed behind to clean, pack, and prep for next year. Matt wasn't supposed to be there at all. He was a second-year counselor, cocky, charming, good with the kids. He had a scholarship waiting and supposed to be back home prepping for college orientation. But he stayed, volunteered even, said he had unfinished business. We figured he had a summer fling he wasn't ready to let go of. Turns out, we were wrong. Matt kept sneaking off at night. We'd find his bunk empty after dinner, his flashlight missing. Sometimes he wouldn't come back until dawn. Clothes damp, eyes sunken. He told us he was hiking, exploring. But I noticed something odd. He always came back with bits of charcoal under his nails. And that smell, like smoke, rot, and old pine needles. One night I followed him. He didn't take the main trail. He cut behind the old mess hall, the one that had been condemned after a fire 20 years earlier. No one went near it. Roof half collapsed, black scorch marks up the side, floorboards that could swallow you whole. But Matt went inside. I waited 5 minutes, then crept to the back door. I expected to hear creaking or footsteps. Instead, I heard chanting. Low, rhythmic, not in English. It vibrated through the wood. I peeked through a crack in the wall. What I saw made my blood freeze. Matt had cleared a circle in the middle of the ruined dining hall. Ashes were smeared in symbols across the floor. Spirals, triangles, crooked runes. He stood in the center with a matchbook in one hand and a photograph in the other. He was talking to the floor. "I've come back," he said, "like you asked." I left before he saw me. The next morning, Matt was gone. We searched the trails, cabins, canoes, nothing. Just his boots, sitting neatly by the mess hall's back door, toes pointed inside. The director called his parents. A ranger came out, but no one really pushed it. People disappear in the woods sometimes. It's sad, but not rare. Only I knew it wasn't the woods that took him. I went back that night. The air inside the mess hall was cold, unnaturally so. The ashes were still there, undisturbed. The symbols looked fresher, like someone had redrawn them. I found Matt's journal wedged behind a loose board near the fireplace. A yellow legal pad, half full, pages warped for moisture. The entries started normal, camp stuff, kid drama, mild flirting. Then they shifted. He wrote about voices. A girl whispering to him in his sleep. Dreams of fire, faces in smoke, memories that weren't his. Something beneath the camp had been buried, waiting. He said the burned mess hall was the site of a ritual, a failed one. That the fire was never accidental. That a counselor back in the 50s tried to summon something ancient and succeeded for a moment. Long enough for it to slip through. And that it never left. Matt believed the thing was still trapped beneath the old hall, dreaming, feeding, whispering. He wrote, "It calls to the lonely ones, the ones who've lost something. It promises answers, but you have to give something first. You have to invite it." The last page was smeared with ash. Only one line remained legible. "I saw my sister again. She forgave me." Matt never had a sister. Camp Black Hollow reopened the following summer like nothing happened. Fresh paint, new counselors, a rebuilt mess hall, this time with concrete walls and steel doors. But every year since, at least one counselor reports sleepwalking. At least one hears whispers in the kitchen after dark. But sometimes, when the stove is off and the night is still, someone smells smoke that shouldn't be there. I haven't been back. But I keep Matt's journal locked in a box under my bed. And some nights, I swear it moves. Just slightly. Like someone inside is still writing. The Thing Under Cabin 6. Every camp has that one cabin no one wants. At Camp Arrowhead, it was Cabin 6. It sat lower than the others, half sunken into a shaded dip in the hillside. The boards were warped from old water damage, the windows fogged for no reason. It always smelled faintly of mildew and iron, and something else beneath that. Something almost sweet and rotten. No one ever talked about Cabin 6. It wasn't on the map. It wasn't assigned to any campers. It just sat there, crooked and abandoned, like it was waiting. I didn't know any of this when I got transferred. A wasp nest in Cabin 3 sent my bunk up in a frenzy, and the only available space was Cabin 6. My counselor, Lex, and I were told it was fine, just dusty. Give it a sweep and light some incense, the director said. It's just a cabin. It wasn't. The first thing we noticed was the trapdoor. It was in the back corner, hidden under a loose bunk frame. The wood around it was darker, not moldy, just stained. There was no handle, just a carved out notch in the boards and a rusted iron hinge that groaned like it hadn't been opened in years. I didn't mention it to the kids, just told them to avoid that side of the cabin. We moved the bed back over and left it alone. That night, I woke up to scratching. Soft, deliberate, like fingernails dragging slowly across the floor from underneath. By the end of the week, the kids were complaining. Weird noises, smells like meat. Something touched my foot. Lex swore he saw someone standing outside the cabin just after lights out. But when he ran out to check, no one was there. Just footprints, small ones, bare. We started burning sage and playing music at night. Didn't help. Then one of the campers, Danny, started sleepwalking. We'd wake up to find him standing in the corner, facing the trapdoor, whispering. I can hear it breathing, he said one morning. It's not hungry yet, but it will be. We decided to tell the head counselor. She just looked at us, long and tired, and said, You found the door, didn't you? That's when we learned the real history. Cabin 6 was originally a storage building built decades before the rest of the camp. Before Arrowhead was even a camp, the land had been part of a logging company settlement, and Cabin 6 was their supply shack. Until a man named Samuel Coates, a worker gone mad, locked himself inside and never came out. They say he carved strange symbols into the walls, said he spoke to the dirt, that something under the floor promised him peace. When the others finally broke in, he was gone. No blood, no body, just the hatch, open and empty. They nailed it shut, built over it, and forgot. Until we moved in. That night, the trapdoor was open. Danny was gone. The bed had been shoved aside. The boards peeled up like something had forced its way through. A wet trail of dark streaks led down into the black. Lex wanted to go after him. I stopped him. You'll be next, I said. We called the director. Authorities came. Dogs refused to go near the cabin. They said Danny probably wandered off into the woods. Classic runaway. Happens more often than people think. They sealed the trapdoor again, boarded the cabin, put up caution tape. By the next summer, Cabin 6 was bulldozed. But here's the part that still keeps me up. 2 weeks after the season ended, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a Polaroid. Old, scratched, blurry, of a face in the dark. Danny's face. Mouth open, eyes wide. Behind him, Something with too many limbs was crawling up the wall. There was a note on the back, just 5 words, scrawled in charcoal. It's not done with me. The fire that never went out. At Camp Evergreen, there's an old clearing out past the West Trail. No cabins, no tents, just a ring of scorched earth and a circle of black stones that have never been moved. They call it the Cold Fire Pit. New campers are told to stay away. Counselors just joke about it, say the fire still burns there, even in the rain. Say it was the site of a bad s'mores incident, but every so often, someone stumbles into that clearing at night, and the fire is always lit. I first heard the story of an old maintenance guy named Red. He'd been working at Evergreen for 30 years and said the pit was older than the camp itself. Used to be a ritual site, or maybe a burial ground, depending on who you asked. But whatever it is, he told me, that fire's not natural. Doesn't burn hot, doesn't burn out, and it doesn't like being watched. I laughed it off, just another weird tale to scare the rookies. Until the night it pulled in one of my campers. It was my second year as a counselor. We had a small group that session, maybe 20 kids, mostly younger, mostly homesick. We'd had a rough week, stomach bug, flash flood warnings, a raccoon invasion in the food shed. So by the time Friday rolled around, I was exhausted. I dozed off during campfire, just for a second, and when I woke up, Myra was gone. Myra was 9, bright, quiet, always drawing. She had this sketch pad she never let go of, filled with forests and shadows and eyes that floated in empty trees. Her bunkmates said she had wandered off after hearing someone call her name. She said it came from the woods, one girl whispered. She said the fire was singing to her. We found Myra standing in the cold fire clearing, barefoot, eyes wide, arms limp at her sides. The fire burned in front of her, a ring of white-blue flame that didn't flicker, didn't crackle, just pulsed. I stepped into the clearing. The air was ice cold, though the fire burned just inches away, and it made no heat. Myra, I said softly, reaching out. It's okay. Let's go back. She turned her head slowly, like it took effort. Her eyes were glassy. I can see them, she said. They're still burning. Then she collapsed. We carried her back. She didn't wake up until morning. The nurse said it was exhaustion, maybe mild exposure. But when I looked through her sketchpad later, I found something new. A drawing of the fire pit. Perfectly detailed, right down to the scorch lines. And standing inside the flames were faces. Dozens of them. Melting. Screaming. One face in the center was grinning. Red told me the real story a week later. Back in 1963, before the camp had cabins or counselors, it was just a forest plot with a few lean-tos and a ranger named Barrett who oversaw the grounds. One dry July, a group of local teens came up to camp illegally. They drank, made a bonfire, got rowdy. One of them, a boy named Jace, fell in and never came out. They searched for hours. All they found was a charred ring and a pile of stones that hadn't been there the day before. No body, no remains, just ash. That fall, 3 more people vanished in the same woods, always near that clearing, always at night. The fire pit was discovered months later, still warm. The stories grew. Some say the pit is a portal. Others say it's cursed, that the fire feeds on grief, that it burns memory instead of wood. Brad believed it was something older than fire itself, something that once tasted sacrifice and never stopped craving it. After Myra's incident, the camp blocked off the clearing with fencing and no trespassing signs. But we all knew it didn't matter. Kids still found their way there. Campers started waking with ash under their fingernails. One girl claimed she heard her dead father's voice in the flames. A counselor nearby lost her mind after she stared at it too long. She said it was showing her things, regrets, mistakes. The moment she died, even though she was still alive. The last summer I worked at Camp Evergreen, we lost another, a boy named Elijah. Quiet kid, never caused trouble. One morning, he was just gone. No signs, no note, no witnesses. Just a trail of soot from his bunk to the edge of the woods. I checked the clearing that night. The fire was bigger than I'd ever seen, tall and bright and still cold. As I stood there, something whispered behind me. It used Elijah's voice. "It doesn't hurt once you give in." I ran. Camp Evergreen still runs every summer. The cold fire pit is still there, surrounded now by fences and motion lights. But none of that keeps it dark. The fire still burns. No one has ever seen it go out. And if you stand too close for too long, it remembers your name. The Emberlight Circle. I've done a lot of camping in my life. Enough to know the difference between a bad vibe and just your run-of-the-mill nerves when you're deep in the woods with only nylon and optimism between you and whatever's out there. But what happened that weekend up on the Emberlight Ridge, that was something else entirely. We weren't even planning on going there, not originally. It was Lee who brought it up again. She'd been fixated on the place ever since we found it the year before. A weird circle of blackened stones on a forgotten hilltop in the Alleghenies, with no trails leading in or out, no signs of campfires, no trash or boot prints. Just those stones, smooth, worn, burned into the earth like something ceremonial. "It's the perfect place to get off the grid," she'd said. "No signal, no people, just us and the trees." So it was me, my brother Simon, Leah, her boyfriend Nick, and Nick's sister Cassie, who packed into my Subaru and headed out. 5 of us, laughing, singing dumb road trip songs, swearing we'd eat nothing but trail mix and grilled sausages. We didn't know what we were walking into. By the time we parked at the old fire road, dusk was already settling into the trees. We hiked up the winding, overgrown trail with our packs bouncing and flashlights cutting through the underbush. That's when I first noticed the silence. No birds, no bugs, not even the distant rustle of deer. Just the crunch of our boots and the occasional cough of someone clearing their throat. Cassie was the first to say something. "Is it always this dead up here?" Leah didn't miss a beat. "It's perfect, right?" We broke through the trees into the clearing just as the sun slipped behind the ridge, and there it was again, the stone circle. Black. Perfect. Like someone had measured each piece before setting it. We didn't set up our tents inside the circle, of course. That would have felt wrong. Even then, with daylight barely gone, there was something about it that made our stomach twist. So we pitched camp just outside its ledge. Leah took photos, Nick cracked open beers, and Simon started building a fire. That night, we told stories around the flames, like we always did. Ghost stories, mostly made up on the spot. Cassie told one about a woman who could only be seen in reflections. Nick told some recycled campfire tale about skinwalkers. But then Leah said something strange. Let's try something, she said, setting her phone on the log beside her. We each go into the circle, alone, for 1 minute. I laughed. What, like a dare? More like a ritual, she smiled, just to see if we feel anything. Everyone shrugged. Seemed harmless. I volunteered to go first. I stepped into the ring and sat cross legged on the moss. 1 minute. Nothing happened. Then Nick went. Then Simon. Then Cassie. Then Leah. She didn't come back for 5. When she did, her eyes looked glassy, like she was somewhere else for a second, before she snapped back. You okay? I asked. She blinked. Yeah, just thought I heard something. The second night. The next morning, Leah was up before any of us. I found her kneeling in the circle, just sitting there, staring at the ground like she'd lost something. I almost didn't want to disturb her, but something about the way she was breathing, slow, measured, made me uneasy. Hey, I said gently, stepping just to the edge. You good? She looked up at me and smiled. I had the weirdest dream. About what? She stood and brushed off her pants. Not sure. I just remember fire. Like a lot of fire. But I wasn't afraid. It felt peaceful. Kind of beautiful, actually. That set the tone for the day. Everyone else seemed a little off. Simon kept spacing out mid-sentence. Nick said he had a pounding headache that wouldn't go away. Cassie complained about how her sleeping bag had been soaked when she woke up. Only her bag. The rest of the tents were dry. We blamed the altitude or maybe bad food, but as the day dragged on, the unease thickened like fog. At one point, Simon tripped over something sticking up from the dirt, just outside the circle. He brushed away the moss and held it up. It was a scorched piece of porcelain, maybe from a doll. Burned black and cracked, but you could still make out the curve of a cheek, a single unblinking painted eye. I don't like this, Cassie muttered. Nick tossed it into the woods. That night, we kept the fire big. Nobody said it, but none of us wanted to sleep. The woods were just too quiet, too heavy. Eventually, one by one, people drifted off. I stayed up, and I heard it. A low, hollow crackling. Not from the fire, but from beyond it, from the circle. I turned and saw Leah, standing inside it again. Not moving, just standing there. Her eyes were closed, but her lips were moving like she was whispering something to herself. Then she opened her mouth wider and screamed. Not a scream of fear. This was a scream like someone waking up in the middle of surgery. Raw, panicked, ancient. We ran to her, but by the time we crossed the stones, she collapsed. She wouldn't speak the rest of the night. Part 3. Burn Marks. We should have left. I know that now. But when morning came, Leah was calm again. She brushed it off like it was a night terror. Said she didn't remember screaming. Said we must have imagined it. But her skin told a different story. On her lower back, just above her waistband, were 4 perfect circles, burned into her. Like something had pressed hot metal into her while she slept. Nick flipped. He wanted to hike out right then. But Simon and I talked him down. Told him we'd leave first thing in the morning. But deep down, I knew it wasn't going to be that easy. Cassie had a dream that night. She said someone was standing over her, brushing her hair, whispering in a language she didn't know. When she woke up, there were ashes in her sleeping bag. Nick's tent zipper had melted shut from the inside. And Simon? Simon went missing. We found his boot prints leading into the trees. Just one set going in, none coming out. We searched until dark, calling his name until our voices went hoarse. Cassie insisted she heard him whisper her name from the circle, but when we checked, it was empty. We didn't sleep that night. We huddled by the fire, watching the circle, watching each other, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Then just before dawn, Simon walked back into camp, naked, covered in soot, and smiling. Part 4. The Ember Light. He didn't remember leaving. Said he'd been dreaming of firelight and music, low humming voices all around him. He said he saw a woman with black glass eyes and hair like smoke. She told me everything was going to be okay, he whispered. She said we're close now. I asked, close to what? He looked at me and a smile vanished. To the last night. I didn't sleep after that. When the sun rose, we tried to pack, but Leah refused to leave. Said we weren't done yet, that the fire hadn't finished. And we couldn't find the fire road. It should have been right where we came in, straight down from the ridge. But it was gone, like the woods had shifted overnight. Trees we didn't remember, paths that looped back. Even the compass app on my phone spun aimlessly. Nick tried to make a break for it, just bolted into the woods. He didn't make it 30 yards before we heard a scream. When we found him, he was kneeling in front of a tree, clutching something to his chest. It was the burned doll's head Simon had tossed. He wouldn't let go. Part 5. Containment. That night, Leah built a second fire. Not in our ring, in the center of the Blackstone Circle. She said we had to finish what we started, that we had to feed it. That was when I realized what was happening. This wasn't a place of gathering. It was a prison, and we were opening it. I tried to drag Leah away, but Simon stopped me. He was different now. Calm. Empty-eyed. They chose us, he whispered. Cassie was crying. Nick was catatonic. Leah was humming that same low tune we heard in our dreams. So I made a decision. I grabbed the canister of white gas and dumped it into the fire. All of it. Then I lit it. The fire roared. Not just flame. Light. Bright, burning light that washed everything in gold. The screams came then. Not from Leah. Not from us. From beneath the stones. A howl of fury and freedom lost. The earth cracked. And then, just like that, it was gone. The fire. The light. The circle. It was just forest again. We found the road in the morning. Simon never spoke again. Leah forgot everything after that first night. Nick was institutionalized. Cassie moved across the country and never returned my calls. As for me, sometimes I see firelight in the trees when I close my eyes. And sometimes I smell smoke where there is no fire. We didn't break the circle. We reinforced it. But whatever was inside, it remembers us. And it waits. The Ridge. It was the second week of November when the boys headed out to the Monongahela. Same weekend every year. Rain or shine, snow or sun. For the last 22 years, the trip was more about tradition than trophies. 4 of them this time: Cal, Rick, Tommy, and Jesse. The fifth, Dean, was laid up with a busted hip after slipping on his barn steps. He made them promise to FaceTime him from camp, but cell service was a rare commodity that far out. They left from Cal's place at 4 in the morning, piling into the beat-up Silverado with coolers, rifles, gear, and a case of beer. As always, Tommy brought his dog-eared topo map, and Jesse insisted on playing cassette tapes of old country songs. Rick rode shotgun, tossing jerky back to the others while giving Cal crap about the route. You sure this road even shows up on GPS? Rick joked, watching the needle twitch on the dashboard compass. Only map you need is in here, Cal said, tapping his forehead. Besides, we're going somewhere new this year. A spot I heard about near Spruce Knob, way off the trail. Nobody goes there. That was true, and there were reasons for that. The site sat miles past any ranger station, past even the usual camping zones where forest roads turned to dirt and dirt turned to rock. Locals had a name for the area, although it wasn't on any map: Dead Mare Ridge. The name came from a story about a Civil War courier who tried to cross the mountain on horseback and was found weeks later. Bloodless, both eyes missing. Oh man. The horse split in two like it had been ripped apart. Cal didn't tell them that part, though. By late afternoon, the ridge came into view. A towering crest covered in red pines, cloud shadows slinking across it like oil on water. The woods were dense, hushed, and cold. Too cold for mid-November. They set up camp in a narrow clearing, a half circle of trees like sentinels staring inward. Cal got the fire going, Jesse unpacked the folding chairs, and Tommy, who brought a new trail camera, wandered off to strap it to a tree. That first night, they roasted sausages and drank too much. Jesse retold the story of the time Rick shot a 10-point buck and cried like a baby. I would too. Rick flipped him off. Laughter echoed in the woods, but something about the trees swallowed sound. The echoes died too fast, like the forest didn't want to carry them. Tommy was the first to feel it. I'm not saying it's haunted, he muttered, poking the fire, but doesn't this place feel, I don't know, still? No wind, Jesse noted. No birds either. Cal dismissed it. Elevation messes with things. You get weird air currents, barometric stuff. Nothing to worry about. But Jesse couldn't sleep. Around 2 in the morning, he heard it. A whistle, low and drawn out. Not like a bird, too deliberate. It came from the trees. Then a crunch of leaves, then nothing. Morning came, gray and damp. Rick's tent was open. His boots were still inside, laces tied neatly. His rifle leaned against the tree where he'd set it the night before. The ground outside was undisturbed. No drag marks, no footprints, just absence. They searched. Hours of shouting his name, backtracking every game trail. Cal used his flare gun to signal twice, but nothing. Tommy checked the trail cam footage, but the SD card was blank, corrupted. It had never happened before. That night, the forest turned hostile. They found a deer carcass 50 yards from camp. It hadn't been shot. Its legs were broken, head twisted backward, eyes wide open like it had died terrified. No signs of a predator, no blood. And the smell, it wasn't rot. It was metallic, like hot coins. Cal started talking about the knot deer, a creature in Appalachia lore that looks almost like a deer until it doesn't. Sometimes it stands on two legs, sometimes its joints bend the wrong way, sometimes it even speaks. Tommy had read about it too. He added that the forest in these parts were rumored to be one of the thin places. Old world folklore said these spots were where the veil between our world and something else was paper thin. Jesse thought it was all campfire bullshit until they heard Rick's voice. Guys? It was coming from the trees. Not far. Weak like wind through a PVC pipe. Guys, I'm cold. Jesse stood. Rick? That you, man? Tommy tackled him before he took a step. That's not Rick, he whispered. Listen to it. It sounds off, like it's a recording playing. Please, came the voice again. Come help me. I'm hurt. They didn't sleep that night. The fire burned low. The woods pressed in. At some point, Cal swore he saw movement. Something watching from behind a tree, with eyes too wide and a glowing faintly blue. The next morning, Jesse was gone. His boots, too, were by the fire. Everything else vanished. No sign of a struggle. Tommy wanted to run. Cal convinced him to stay one more night to make a final search in the daylight. They shouldn't have stayed. That evening, the air changed. It became thick, static charged, the kind of heaviness you feel before lightning. Even the sky was clear. Tommy, now paranoid, set up a salt ring around the fire using what little rock salt they had left from the cooler. At midnight, it came. A figure stood just beyond the firelight. It looked like Rick, but wrong somehow. Too tall, face blank, eyes bulging and milky. Its mouth moved, but the voice came from behind them. I found the trail. Cal raised his rifle, but it jammed. Wouldn't even click. The figure turned its head slowly, impossibly far, until its neck cracked like dry twigs. Then it backed into the woods, feet never lifting, just gliding. Tommy screamed. They ran. They didn't stop until sunrise. The truck barely started, sputtering like something had drained the battery. As they peeled away, Cal checked the rear view. The ridge was gone. Just gone. Fog where it had been. As if the land had folded in on itself. Rick and Jesse were never found. Cal never returned to the woods. Tommy moved to Kansas and took up carpentry. Said he liked working with things that stayed where you left them. But sometimes, when Cal's up late drinking, he swears he still hears the voice, calling, laughing, waiting. The thing that waited in the smoke. I wasn't new to solo camping when this happened. I had already done 4 or 5 trips that year alone, usually in spring or fall when the bugs were down and the trails were quiet. It's how I clear my head. Pack light, hike until I'm tired, set up, read a little by the fire, fall asleep with the coyotes howling in the distance. This trip was different. It was late September, and I'd taken a Friday off to stretch a weekend into something longer. I was hiking a loop through a section of Desert Canyon out west, somewhere I'll leave unnamed, because frankly, I don't want people going looking for this place. The trailhead was already remote, but I planned to go off trail for a few miles the second day to reach a secluded box canyon I spotted on satellite maps. It didn't show up on most backpacking apps, just this thin gouge of sandstone snaking off the main draw, with a dry creek bed curling into a cul-de-sac surrounded by cliffs. One way in, one way out. Sounded perfect. And the first night was. I pitched camp near the end of the box canyon, just where the shadows fell along the dry wash. The air was cool and dry, stars out like spilled sugar overhead. I made a small fire using a few sticks and a fire puck I packed in, then propped my boots on a rock and let the quiet soak in. That's when I noticed the smoke. It wasn't acting right. It would drift normally for a few seconds off to the west, carried by the breeze, and then, without warning, it would pull sharply in the opposite direction, like something was breathing it in, like the canyon itself was inhaling. I watched it happen twice more. There was no change in the wind, nothing moved. But each time, when the smoke bent eastward toward the narrow bend of the canyon, I thought, just for a moment, I saw something form in it. A shape. A figure. But it never held for long, just a silhouette. Then, gone. I laughed it off. It's been a long day. Shadows and firelight can mess with your head. That's what I told myself. But I didn't sleep easy that night. The second night, the smoke pulled eastward again, and this time the silhouette held longer. It had shoulders, arms, a crooked spine like a question mark. I froze. The wind hadn't shifted. My fire was small, but still the smoke slid in that direction like it was being drawn toward the bend in the canyon where the cliff walls narrowed. The figure didn't move. It just stood there in the swirling haze like it was waiting for something. Then it vanished again. I waited an hour, then threw dirt on the fire and crawled into my tent. The thing is, once the fire was out, I felt better. Like whatever it was had no interest in the dark. It was tied to the smoke. And the fire made the smoke. And the smoke made it visible. And that meant I could control it, right? The third night is when it got bad. I made camp in a slightly different spot, closer to the mouth of the canyon, maybe subconsciously trying to be closer to the exit. I didn't light a fire right away. I waited until full dark. When I finally did light it, I kept it small, just enough for warmth. The smoke trailed upward, normal at first. I was eating a protein bar, trying not to look in the direction of that bend. But eventually, I did. The smoke had pulled east again. There it was. The figure. Closer this time. It was still made of smoke, kind of, but darker than the smoke itself. Like its edges were outlined in soot. Its limbs were too long, the joints bent wrong, and its head, if you could call it that, hung sideways like it was listening to something far off. Then it moved. It didn't walk. It reformed. First in one puff of smoke, then another close to me, and another closer still. Every time the fire popped or flared, the smoke would carry it a little farther up the canyon wall until it was standing on the ridge above me, watching. I killed the fire fast that night, didn't sleep at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined it standing right outside my tent, silently waiting for me to light it up again. I decided to hike out the next morning. It was supposed to be a 5-day loop, but screw it. I packed up, tried to retrace my GPS route out of the canyon. But when I reached the spot where I originally entered the box canyon, it wasn't there. The walls didn't match. The dry wash curved wrong. And my GPS? Offline. No signal. It was frozen. No matter how far I hiked, I was still in the canyon, and it was getting late. That night, I made the mistake of lighting another fire. Not because I wanted to, because I had to. The temperature dropped like a rock, probably into the 30s. I had no other way to keep warm. My hands were shaking, and I needed the heat to boil water. So I kept the fire low, wrapped myself in a sleeping bag, and tried to ignore the way the smoke drifted back towards the canyon's end. And of course, it showed up again. This time, it didn't just stand there. It circled the campsite. Each time the wind shifted, the figure reappeared in the curling smoke. On the left side of the fire, behind me, then across the wash. It was moving in a loop, but only visible when the smoke caught it. Like it existed in the gaps, the pauses, the space between flames. When I looked away, I heard things. Crackling where there was no fire. Breathing that matched the rhythm of my own but stayed behind it. Like something was echoing me just out of sync. Sometime after midnight, I woke up freezing. The fire was out, and I could smell smoke. Not from my fire, from behind me. Thick, greasy smoke, like a tire fire or a house burning. It had weight to it, almost metallic. I rolled over in my bag, and in the darkness, I saw nothing. But I felt it. Right at the edge of the ashes, something was there, watching me. It didn't speak, it didn't move, but the ground felt warmer near it, like a heat shimmer at midnight. Then the smoke pulled toward it, backwards, like the breath of a dying fire being sucked up into a chimney. I passed out. I woke up to a full sun and a cold, dead world. The fire pit was empty. Not cold, empty. The ashes were gone, the ring of rocks disturbed, the dirt beneath scraped clean, like something had erased the fire completely. No prints, no soot, no sign of the smoke. I packed my gear and hiked. Kept going until I found the trail again, or at least a trail. It wasn't the one I came in on, but I followed it anyway. It led me out, eventually. A day later, I hitched a ride with an ATV group who thought I was part of a search and rescue operation. They said I looked smoked. I never went back. That was 2 years ago. Since then, I haven't camped solo. Not once. I still hike. I still sit by the fire. But I watch the smoke now. Because sometimes When the fire's just right, I swear I see it again. The thing that waits in the smoke. Whistler's Hollow. There's a place in eastern Kentucky where the hollers run deeper than they should, where the trees grow too tight, and the fog never quite lifts. Locals call it Whistler's Hollow. Most folks don't call it anything at all. They just know not to go there, especially after dark, especially in November. But Cal, Nate, Brennan, and Drew didn't believe in that kind of talk. They'd been best friends since high school, all raised in the hills, and they've hunted every patch of land between Breathitt and Pike counties. But this trip was special. It was their first reunion in years. Cal had just gotten out of the military, Brennan was back from a rough divorce, and Drew had finally finished his lineman certification. Nate, he brought the whiskey. The plan was quite simple: hike in on Friday, hunt Saturday, drink and camp through Sunday. Cal had heard about the hollow from an old timer who guided him through some backwoods land a few months prior. Real game rich area, he said, stroking his gray beard, but watch out for the whistler. Cal laughed then, but that warning came back to him as they parked the truck off an unmarked trail near Cripple Creek and started their hike in. Fog licked the ground, even at noon. The wind didn't move the trees, they just stood there. They were waiting. They hiked 5 miles in before reaching a clearing. It was shaped like a bowl, rimmed with pine and peppered with rotting stumps. A few old mining carts lay rusting in the dirt, swallowed halfway by moss and thyme. A rickety mine entrance gaped near the eastern slope. No signs, no boards, just a black mouth dug into the hillside. You didn't say this was near a mine, Brennan muttered, adjusting the strap on his rifle. I didn't know, Cal said, though something about that didn't sit right. That night, they sat by the fire, trading stories. Nate was halfway into the bottle when he started whistling. A slow, tuneless melody. Cal flinched. Don't do that, he snapped. Why? Nate laughed. Scared the boogeyman's gonna come whistle back? They all laughed. Cal didn't. Because that old timer had told him one more thing. Real low, like it hurt him to say it. If you hear it whistling, don't answer. And for the love of God, don't follow. By midnight, the forest was silent. Not the peaceful kind of silent. Not the kind where cicadas lull you to sleep. This was a pressed silence, like the trees were holding their breath. Then they heard it. A whistle. 3 long, drawn-out notes. Like someone exhaling a funeral song through a busted flute. It came from behind the mine. Nate stood up first, but Cal grabbed his arm. Don't. Probably some local screwing with us, Brennan muttered, eyes scanning the dark. Then it came again. Closer. Same 3 notes. This time, netted with something else. A voice. Nate. They froze. Drew was the first to speak. Did that sound like your mama? It was her voice, Nate whispered. She passed last year. No one slept that night. The next morning, Brennan was gone. His sleeping bag was laid out like he'd never been. Boots still inside the tent, rifle untouched. They split up in pairs, Cal and Drew, and Nate alone at camp. They searched all day. No tracks, no blood, no sign he ever left. Then Drew found a staircase. It rose from the forest floor, 20 steps tall, ending in nothing. Old, wooden, freestanding, clean, no moss, no decay. Don't touch it, Cal said. Why the hell is it here? I've heard stories about stairs in the woods. They say if you see one, you turn around. You don't look back. They did just that. Back at camp, Nate was pacing, shaking. It came back while you were gone. It said it had Brennan, that he was cold and scared and alone. Drew suggested they leave now. They packed fast, but fog poured in from all sides. The trail disappeared. Their GPS spun uselessly. Trees stretched taller. Everyone looked the same. That night, Drew was taken. One moment he was stoking the fire, the next, a scream, then silence. No struggle, no prints, just his hat, spinning in the air like it had been thrown straight up. Cal didn't sleep. Nate didn't move. And when the whistle came again, low and wet, curious, it was Nate who stood. I have to go, he said. It's not her, Cal begged. I know, but if I don't, I think it'll take you next. Nate walked into the trees and never came back. Cal was alone. One man, one rifle, one night left. The whistler called all through the dark, different voices overlapping. His father, his drill sergeant, Brennan, Nate, Drew, even his own. In the morning, the fog lifted, and Cal walked out. He didn't speak again for weeks. He tells the story now, just once a year, when the seasons change and the wind gets sharp. He still hears it sometimes. The whistle. 3 notes. And if he listens too long, it whispers his name. Lights down the ravine. I never used to believe in anything supernatural. Not ghosts, not cryptids, not weird energy or cursed ground. I'm the kind of person who reads the science behind ghost sightings, the psychology of mass hysteria. I was that person. And then I camped near Blackhorn Ravine. This story didn't happen decades ago. It wasn't passed down by my uncle or something I heard in a bar. This was me. Last October. A simple camping trip to a place I'd never been, with nothing but a pack, a dog, and a weekend off. And I left a different person. The idea came from a friend. She's a Forest Service worker in a pretty remote region out west. She gave me the tip after I told her I wanted a quiet solo weekend. Something peaceful before the snow started falling. She said try the saddle above Blackhorn Ravine. Views are killer. No one ever goes there anymore. That anymore should have been a clue. The hike in was rough. I had to across a narrow old bridge, long rotted in spots. Then bushwhack through maybe a mile of dense undergrowth to reach the rise she mentioned. But she was right. It was gorgeous. The ravine spread out below like a massive scar in the earth. Sharp cliffs, sheer drop offs, and a forest so dense it looked like green fur covering the valley. There were no trails down, no paths leading in, just rocks and trees. I set up camp on a wide ledge above the ravine, flat enough for a tent and a fire, with a view that looked something like from a postcard. My dog Cody did a slow circle of the site, sniffed the wind, then lay down with a sigh. That was the only time he seemed relaxed the whole trip. That night, I saw the first light. It was maybe a few 100 feet below, moving slowly between the trees, flickering, pale yellow, like an old lantern. It caught my eye while I was making tea by the fire. I assumed it was another camper or maybe a poacher, even though I hadn't seen a single car at the trailhead. But the light didn't behave right. It didn't bounce like a flashlight. It didn't cast shadows. It floated. And it moved too smoothly, drifting between trees without breaking pace, like it was gliding. Then it disappeared behind a ridge. I watched for another 20 minutes. Nothing. Eventually, I turned in. At 2:18 a.m., I woke to Cody whining. He was standing at the tent flap, ears up, tail stiff. I unzipped the door and looked outside. There were 3 lights now, lower in the ravine, moving in separate directions, weaving between trees, converging and separating like they were dancing. I held Cody back, told him to lie down, but he kept staring, hackles up. The lights glowed for maybe 10 minutes, then blinked out all at once. That's when I started feeling watched. The next day, I hiked back down towards the bridge. Halfway there, I found something that hadn't been there on the way in. A circle of rocks, perfectly round, about 6 feet across, flattened into the dirt like it had been pressed down by something heavy. Inside the circles, there were ashes. Not from a wood fire, these ashes were fine and gray, like something had been incinerated to nothing. Cody wouldn't go near it. He stopped at the edge of the path and growled until I turned us around. I spent the day debating whether to leave early, but the sun was out, the air was cool, and a part of me felt like I was just spooked. So I stayed. Big mistake. That night, the lights came back. 5 of them. I killed the fire and sat in the dark, just watching. They weren't random anymore. They moved in lines, up and down the ravine like they were searching for something. Then one of them turned and started climbing, straight up the cliff wall. No trail, no switchbacks, just steady ascent. I don't mean someone was climbing with a lantern. I mean the light itself was moving up the rock face. That's when Cody started barking. Loud. Frantic. And that's when I saw the silhouette. Something was behind the light. Not carrying it, part of it. A figure, tall and thin, with limbs too long and a neck that bent at the wrong angle. It moved like it was swimming through the air, half floating, half pulling itself up the cliff. And it was coming straight for me. I ran, left the tent, grabbed Cody, and ran to the far edge of the saddle, flashlight shaking in my hand. When I turned back, the light was gone. So was my tent. I don't mean packed up. I mean gone. No poles, no fabric, not even the stakes. Just flattened grass, like nothing had ever been there. I hiked out that night. Didn't stop until I was back on the road. Didn't sleep. I told my friend about it a week later. She went quiet and said, "I thought that place was done." I asked her what she meant. She said the ravine was used in the 1930s for fire line camps. Crews used kerosene lanterns to light the way at night. One group went missing, vanished completely. All they ever found was a trail of lanterns, burning, unbroken, leading straight into the canyon and then stopping. She said no one camps there anymore. She didn't think I'd actually go. I don't know what those lights are. I don't know what that thing was. But I know this. When you see a light where no light should be, don't follow it. Because sometimes it's not just a warning. Sometimes it's already on its way up. Also, what kind of park ranger friend sends you to this camping spot if she knew it was like a bad place? The Crawler by the Ice Cave. This happened to me and my brother last July in the North Cascades. We'd gone out for a long weekend, just the two of us, for what was supposed to be a chill trip. Couple nights camping, some mild climbing, and a hike into this little glacial ice cave we'd heard about on a backpacking forum. No crowds, no noise. I didn't expect to find something living in it, and I sure as hell didn't expect to come back without my brother. The cave wasn't even on the map. There are tons of little glacial runoff caves up there. Some only open a few months a year before collapsing or melting. This one was maybe half a mile off trail, tucked into the shadow of a ravine, the mouth shaped like a jagged sideways grin. It blew cold air, which was a welcome relief in the summer heat. A shallow pool had formed near the entrance. Water so clear it looked like glass. We didn't go inside the first day. We just made camp about 100 yards away, where the trees opened up and gave us a clear view of the cave mouth. There were no other hikers around, no footprints, no trash, no sign anyone had been there in a long while. Which was weird because it was beautiful, almost pristine. Too pristine, if that makes sense. That night, we heard scraping. I woke up sometime after midnight to this dry clicking sound, like claws or something hard being dragged over rock. I sat up in my sleeping bag and I listened. There it was again. Rhythmic. Methodical. Scrape. 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 I unzipped the tent quietly and poked my head out. The sound was coming from the direction of the cave. It stopped. My brother, Pete, was already awake. He was outside, barefoot in the cold grass, facing the cave with his arms crossed. "You hear it too?" I asked. Yeah, he said, but I think it stopped when you opened the tent. We sat there a while, watching. Nothing moved. No wind, no animals, no more sound. Eventually, we went back to bed, but I didn't sleep well, and the temperature had dropped enough that I woke up shivering around 4 a.m., even in my bag. The next morning, we found prints near the edge of the pool. Not footprints, not animal tracks either. They were like long smears, like handprints, but with too many fingers, and no clear heel or toe. Just lines, curved like talons dragging behind a clawing body. Pete joked it was a bear that hadn't finished evolving, but I could tell he was unsettled. We decided to check out the cave entrance anyway. It wasn't deep, maybe 30 feet in before the ice ceiling dipped too low to continue without crawling. The walls were blue and shimmering. Our breath fogged in the cold. The air smelled like old water and minerals. And something else. Rot. Like meat that had been wet for too long. We left fast. That night, it came back. The scraping. Only this time, it didn't stay by the cave. It circled the tent. I heard it move behind us first, then to the left. Scrape, thud. Scrape, thud. Like something pulling its body forward with its arms, then dragging weight behind it. Pete whispered, "Don't move." He unzipped his knife pouch. I could see the blade trembling in his hand. I reached slowly for the flashlight and turned it on. Nothing. But when we got out of the tent that morning, there were marks. Deep, grooved drag marks all the way around the tent in a lopsided spiral. Like it had been casing us. And right at the front flap, there was a perfect handprint in the frost. But the fingers were backwards. The thumb was on the right side. We packed up that morning, but Pete wanted one last look at the cave before we left. Said he wanted to leave a trail camera pointed at it in case anyone else came across it. I waited back at the camp, packing gear and rolling the tent. He was gone maybe 15 minutes. Then I heard the scream. It wasn't long, just one cut short, like someone had clapped a hand over his mouth. I sprinted. Halfway to the cave, I found his phone, still recording video, pointed at the ground. I called his name over and over. Nothing. The mouth of the cave was quiet. Still. No scrape sounds. No movement. No sign of Pete. But inside, just a few feet into the darkness, I saw something pull back. It moved too fast, like a spider returning to its hole. Long arms, pale skin, a flash of black, lidless eyes. Gone. I ran. Left the camera, left the stove, everything. It took hours to get back to the ranger station. Search and rescue went out the next morning. Found Pete's gear, his shoes, even his hat. But not him. The cave collapsed overnight. They said it was natural, a temperature fluctuation. But I know what I saw. Something was living in that cave. Not a bear, Not a person. Something that crawls and waits, and it hates the light. The Black Stag of Pinhoti Ridge. I grew up hiking and camping all over Alabama and Georgia. My dad was a wilderness guide, so we were raised to be smart in the woods, respect the land, respect your limits, and never follow an animal off trail. That last one always seemed obvious, until I broke it, until I followed the stag. That wasn't a normal animal. I know what I saw. I need to say this clearly, right up front. If you're ever camping near the Pinhoti Trail and you see a black stag with glowing eyes, don't follow it, no matter what it shows you, because whatever it leads you to, you'll never come back. This happened 2 years ago. Me and my cousin Jared had just gotten our off week synced up. He was coming back from a deployment overseas, and I'd been working a brutal stretch at the hospital. So we planned a quiet backpacking loop through Talladega National Forest. Just the two of us, plus Jared's dog Molly. We weren't going for speed, just 3 nights out, following a lesser traveled branch of the Pinhoti Trail, up over a ridge and back down the old logging routes. We made camp that first night near a bluff, pitched the tent under an overhang that protected us from the wind. It was peaceful. No sounds but insects, breeze, and the dog rustling in the brush. Then the silence hit. Total silence, like a blanket thrown over the woods. Jared noticed it first. Where'd the crickets go? I shrugged. Maybe a coyote nearby. That's when Molly growled. We looked in the direction she was staring and saw it. About 20 yards off, between 2 trees, stood a stag. But not like any I'd ever seen. It was massive, maybe 5 feet tall at the shoulder, jet black, with rough, uneven fur, and antlers that looked cracked and burned. Its eyes glowed faint red. Not reflection, glow. And it wasn't afraid of us. It just stood there, still as a carving. Jared took a step forward, and that's when it turned and walked away, silent as mist. We both stood there for a long time before we went back to the fire. We didn't say much about it. We were both thinking it might have been some sick or mutated buck, maybe with mange or something. That's the kind of lie you tell yourself when you're trying to sleep. But I didn't sleep. Neither did Jared. The next morning, the deer tracks were still there. But they weren't deep, and they didn't have hooves. Whatever it was, the prints looked split and splayed, like clawed toes instead of hooves. 4 on each foot, elongated. Like someone had forced a deer to walk upright for too long, and it gave up halfway. I said we should hike out. Jared wanted to stay. Probably just a sick animal, he said. Might be cool to see it again. Molly wouldn't go near the tracks, but we stayed. That evening, we pushed farther along the ridge. Sunlight got weird up there, thick, golden, like the trees were filtering it in strips. The whole forest felt tilted, like it didn't quite want us there. That night, we camped on a slope overlooking a ravine. Just before dusk, Molly bolted. Jared dropped everything, chased her. I followed. It didn't take long before we were completely off trail, maybe a half-mile down from our site. We finally found her in a clearing, barking her head off at something in the trees. Then we saw it again. The stag. Closer this time. It stepped out from behind two boulders like it had been waiting. Its antlers scraped the rocks as it moved. Wrong. Twisted things that bent like charred wood. And this time, it looked at us. I mean, really looked. Then it turned and walked away. We followed it. I know how stupid that sounds, but in the moment, it felt necessary, like it had purpose, like we were supposed to see something. It didn't run, it walked at a steady pace, always just far enough ahead that we couldn't quite catch up. The forest started to change. Trees got older, denser. We passed a crumbling stone wall, half covered in ivy. Then a circle of flat rocks, cleared, arranged, ancient. None of it was on the map. And the stag waited there. Jared stepped into the stone circle and vanished. Just gone. No flash, no noise. 1 second he was in front of me, the next he was nowhere. I screamed, called his name, ran through the trees. Nothing. Then the stag turned to look at me and spoke. Not out loud, but in my head. Words that weren't words. A meaning that soaked straight into my brain, like heat through the skin. He chose. I passed out. I woke up back at the original camp. It was morning. No sign of Jared. No sign of Molly. Just his pack and boot prints leading into the woods. I tried to call for help, but I had no signal. Had to hike out 2 days alone, half the time thinking I'd lost my mind. Rangers went looking. They found nothing. No signs, no tracks, no dog. Just a place on the ridge where the soil had turned black, like a fire had burned there, but only in a perfect circle. They said hikers go missing all the time. I asked about the stone circle. They clammed up. One of them pulled me aside, told me, off the record, that the Creek people used to tell stories about a black stag that led people off the mountain and into the other woods, the spirit world, a place you don't come back from. He said they call it Nakos Fuswav, or the burned deer. Said it only shows itself to those ready to leave. I haven't been back, but sometimes I dream about that circle and about Jared standing inside it, looking calm, like he knew. If you ever see the black stag out there, don't follow, even if it shows you something beautiful, because whatever it leads you to, you'll never come back. Bloody Trail at Boundary Creek. This happened 4 summers ago, and I still don't have a good explanation for it. I've run it through every rational filter I can. Predators, hoaxes, even sleep deprivation, but nothing sticks. Not really. I wasn't even the one who found the blood first. That was my buddy Colin. There were 3 of us on the trip. Me, Colin, and Marcus. We've been friends since high school. bonded over Boy Scouts, horror movies, and late night hikes back when we thought we were invincible. Now we do one trip a year. Just the three of us. No cell phones, no spouses. Just a long weekend away from the noise. That year, we picked Boundary Creek in Idaho. Beautiful stretch of wilderness. Real remote. Crystal clear water, plenty of trout, and not a single damn person for miles. Or so we thought. The first 2 days were perfect. We hiked 5 or 6 miles in and found a nice spot by the riverbank where it curved near a set of rocks. Shade, soft ground, good tree cover. We pitched tents, filtered water, and spent the day fishing. Marcus caught a fat rainbow trout, which we cooked over the fire with foil and seasoning. Just beer, smoke, and stories that got louder as the night went on. It wasn't until the third morning that something felt off. I woke up to Colin standing at the edge of the camp, squinting at the dirt. He didn't say anything right away, just crouched down with this weird blank look on his face. "You good?" I asked, still half in my sleeping bag. "Check this out," he said. I walked over. There was a trail. A narrow one. Dried blood, almost like someone had spilled drops from a high place and kept moving. It started by the water and cut in a straight line into the woods. The weird thing was, the blood looked old, brown and flaky, but it hadn't been there the night before. We'd walked that area barefoot. For God's sake, I would have stepped right on it. Marcus joined us and tried to joke about it. Mountain lion caught something, dragged it off. No big deal. But the line was too clean. No paw prints, no sign of a struggle, just a thin trail of dried blood going perfectly straight into the woods behind our tents. And it went a long way. We followed it about 50 yards. The farther we went, the quieter the forest got, like everything was holding its breath. The trail led up to a slight incline and ended at a boulder. No carcass, no hair, no bones. Just the rock, clean on all sides. Like something had stood there, or waited. We shrugged it off and went back to camp. But all day, I kept glancing at the woods behind us. The shadows looked deeper, the silence heavier. And that night, when the fire died down and we zipped ourselves into our tents, I couldn't sleep because I heard something moving out there. Not footsteps, dragging. Something long and wet sliding over dirt. The next morning, the trail was back. New. The same thin line of blood, different path. This time, it looped behind Marcus's tent. His face went pale when he saw it. "It's a prank," he said. "It's gotta be." But Colin and I knew better. None of us had left camp that night. I'd heard movement. He'd heard breathing. Marcus hadn't heard a damn thing. But now, the blood was curling around his tent. He didn't laugh after that. That afternoon, we searched the woods. We looked for traps, for game trails, for anything that would explain it. Instead, we found a glove, like OJ. Just kidding, that OJ part's not in there. Half buried near the creek, faded red rubber, like something a butcher or mechanic might wear. No hand inside, thank God. but it was still wet. Smelled like iron. And next to it, a smooth circular stone with a bloody smear. Colin dropped it like it burned him. "This is a message," he said. "This is an animal." We voted to leave the next morning. We packed early, didn't light a fire that night, slept in shifts, listening to every creak, every splash in the water. That night, I swear, I saw something across the river. Not a person, not quite an animal, a figure. Bent low, knees wrong, face featureless. It stood motionless just outside the glow of the moonlight, then dropped out of view like it melded. I didn't say anything to the others. Didn't need to, because when we woke up the next morning, the trail was there again. This time, it led straight through the middle of our camp and into the water. We hiked out in silence. Didn't even stop to eat. 12 miles in a day with full packs. Colin kept glancing behind us. Marcus didn't say a word. When we reached the parking area, Marcus found a note under his windshield wiper. Plain paper, red smudge on the corner. It just said, "Next time, bring a better offering." We haven't camped together since. I still talk to Colin every now and again. Marcus moved out of state. I heard he started drinking again. As for me, I still go out sometimes, but I stay away from rivers, and I never, ever follow trails I didn't make myself. Especially the ones written in blood. Dead Air on Channel 6. Back in 2021, I spent the summer traveling in an old camper van I bought off Craigslist. Kind of a midlife rebellion thing. I was burnt out, divorced, and craving silence, so I took 3 months to drift through state forests, high deserts, and weird little towns out west. That's how I ended up in the Nevada high desert with 4 other guys parked in a loose circle around a dried up basin, watching the sky and messing with ham radios. We weren't professionals, just hobbyists. One night, while listening on Channel 6, we heard something that none of us have ever been able to explain. It started with static. We were cycling through frequencies, sipping beer, trading stories over walkie. Just noise mostly, with the occasional scratch of distant truckers or weather updates. Then the static cuts out. Clean. Dead silent. Then a voice came through. A low mechanical whisper. Male. Muffled like it was recorded on an old tape deck. It said, 1306 southbound. Hollowed path. Full stop. That was it. Then just static again. We all looked at each other. Colt, the oldest of us all, said, "Was that a distress call?" But nobody responded, because we all heard it, and it didn't come from any of our radios. About an hour later, the transmission repeated. Exactly the same. Same cadence, same numbers. 1306 southbound. Hollowed path. Full stop. Then something new. A click. Then, "Please respond. Still here." Cold answered, "Who is this? What's your location?" No response. Just the same numbers again. Then static. I should mention we were maybe 25 miles from the nearest town. No signal, no cell towers, nobody out there but jackrabbits and stubborn old cacti. But Colt pulled out a printed map. He's old school and started checking for anything labeled 1306. Nothing. Then he froze. Holy hell, he said. It's not a highway code. It's coordinates. Latitude 1306. No obvious longitude, but we cross-referenced the rest. Southbound, hollowed path, and realized it might be referencing an old service road that ran through a burned-out canyon east of us. Hollowed path made sense too. A fire tore through the canyon back in the 90s. Everything down there has been dead since. We decided to go check it out. We shouldn't have. We left 2 guys behind and took one of the trucks. Me, Colt, and a younger guy named Renzo. It took us 40 minutes to reach the road. What was left of it, anyway. It was more like a trench, cracked and sun-bleached with weeds poking through asphalt. Nothing but dead trees and silence all around. Then we saw it. An old camper trailer. Half collapsed, roof buckled, covered in dust and bird crap. Just sitting there, like it had been abandoned for years. We got out slowly. There were no tracks, no prints, nothing living. Just the trailer, and a long antenna sticking up from the roof. Colt approached first. He knocked on the slide. No answer. Then we heard the radio in the truck go live. Still here, still here, still here. Over and over. Colt threw the trailer door open. Inside was a mess. Sleeping bag, empty food tins, scattered gear. All old. Moldy. Like whoever lived there left in a hurry. Or didn't leave at all. Renzo gagged and turned away. That's when I saw the wall. It was covered in writing. Numbers. Dozens of them. And in the center, scrawled in what looked like old blood, was a message. Only safe when he talks. Then the radio cut out. Dead air. Something shifted in the air. Like static in your bones. I turned to Colt. Let's go. He didn't argue. But when we turned back to the truck, Renzo was gone. We called his name over and over. Nothing. I ran back to the trailer. Gone. Like he'd been erased. Then the radio snapped on again. Full stop. 1306. Southbound. Hollowed path. The voice was louder now. Faster. Repeating. Like it was panicking. We found Renzo standing about 40 feet into the dead trees. Just standing there. Facing away. Mumbling. I stepped closer and heard what he was saying. He's not talking anymore. Over and over. He's not talking anymore. He's not talking anymore. We grabbed him. Dragged him back to the truck. He didn't fight. Didn't blink. Just kept whispering that same phrase. We left. Didn't talk the whole way back. By the time we reached the camp, the other guys said the signal had completely stopped. We packed up and left that night. Renzo didn't speak again until 2 days later. He never told us what he saw. only thing he said was, "When the voice stops, it sees you." I don't mess with ham radios anymore, and I haven't gone camping since, because that night, something found us. Something old. Something patient. And I think it used that voice to hold it back. So if you're out there scanning frequencies late at night and you hear silence fall all at once, don't wait for the voice, because if it doesn't come back, that means it's already too late. Shadows on Bluebird Mesa. I used to think conspiracy theories were fun, like folklore for modern times. Secret bases, alien tunnels, government cover ups. Entertaining, but not real. Then I spent 3 nights on Bluebird Mesa. I don't think any of it's fun anymore. In 2022, I was working as a grad student out west, studying field acoustics, mainly how low frequency vibration affects wildlife migration patterns. My thesis advisor partnered me with a tribal conservation group from the Jicarilla Apache Nation near Dulce, New Mexico. I was supposed to document natural sound profiles in unfrequented areas for environmental impact analysis. They suggested Bluebird Mesa. It was off the books, not officially protected, but had sensitive topography. When I asked what that meant, they gave me a strange look and said, "Just don't wander at night. Stay on top, and if you hear humming, don't follow it." I brushed it off. I'd camped alone before, plenty of times. I hiked in mid-September. Days were hot, nights crisp, no one else around. Just sagebrush, crumbling cliffs, and the sky so wide it felt like standing in a snow globe. I set up a small tent on the flattest part of the mesa near a stone pile used for ceremonial offerings. I didn't touch it. I'm not an idiot. But something felt off. The air buzzed. Not a sound exactly, more like a vibration in your bones. I assumed it was wind or pressure differentials off the cliffs. That first night, I slept okay until 3:12 a.m. When I woke up, the buzzing had changed. It had direction, and beneath it, a pulsing rhythm, like a heartbeat. I got out of the tent, thinking maybe an earthquake was coming, but the sky was clear and calm. No clouds, no thunder. Then I saw the light. It was faint, maybe a mile out, just over the edge of the mesa. Flickering white-blue, like heat lightning trapped in a snow globe. It wasn't the light that unnerved me. It was the shape. Shadows. Dark. Tall. Stick-thin silhouettes pacing between the light source and the mesa edge. Not animals. Not people. They moved too fluidly, too synchronously. Then the light blinked out. The buzzing stopped, and I realized there were no stars directly above the spot where the light had been. Just a blank blackness, like the sky wasn't sky. I told myself it was my nerves. Thin air, long day, overactive imagination. But I packed a trail camera and aimed it at the ridge, just in case. The next morning, the camera was gone. Not knocked over, gone. Tripod, batteries, mount, nothing left but the indentations in the dirt. No tracks, no drag marks. Just a strange triangle burned into the soil, edges crisp as glass. I hiked farther out the next day, staying on top of the mesa. Around noon, I found something the maps didn't show, a depression in the rock, maybe 30 feet across, shaped like a perfect circle. Smooth. Too smooth. And in the center, a hatch. Metal. Dead flush with the stone. No handle. But I could feel warmth coming off of it, and a faint throb, like standing over a generator humming underground. I didn't touch it. I marked it on my GPS and hiked back to camp. That night, everything changed. Just after midnight, the buzzing came back, louder. And this time, it had words. Not in English, not any language I know, but it spoke clicks, tonal pulses, echoes inside my own head. I sat up and looked out the tent. There were 3 figures standing next to the stone pile. Not walking, not moving, just there. Each over 6 feet tall, skin like ash, joints too long, heads bowed, like they were listening. I turned on my light. They vanished. Not fled. Vanished. I didn't sleep. I just waited for dawn and hiked out at first light. 3 miles out, I passed a man on the trail. Native. Old. Dressed like he worked the land. He nodded and said, "You saw them, didn't you?" I asked what he meant. He said, "You camped on the top. That's not for you." I told him about the hatch. He went silent. Then he said, "That's not a door. That's a mouth." I finished the project remotely. Never went back. That part of the mesa isn't even on most maps. The tribe doesn't mark it. No one hikes up there anymore. Not locals. They say it's always been thin up there. And they don't mean the air. They mean the walls. Between us and something else. And when the hum starts, that's not sound. That's attention. So if you're ever camping out near Dulce and you feel your bones buzz, don't go looking. Don't follow the light. Because something under that mesa is watching. And it doesn't care what language you speak. Why don't skeletons fight each other? They don't have the guts. OldDadGuy. You thought you were alone, didn't you? But they've been watching the whole time. Like, subscribe, and maybe they'll let you sleep tonight.